So the way we had separated the business was essentially more between spot and derivatives. So spot in London and derivatives in Singapore. More as like splitting the land from a regulatory point of view, to be honest, to take less risk as such. We had some clarity with the FCA in the UK on spot, and we had some clarity basically with MAS in Singapore. So that's late 2021, we started a small team in Singapore. And I would say it's more the signal that we want to launch is more that we very much much more focused in Asia these days. Hence me spending about a bit more than 2 months living here in Seoul and discovering the ecosystem, because we don't have a business here per se. It's more about looking for investments and just understanding the ecosystem, but also like in Asia in general, it's just quite a granular ecosystem as such, so it's just quite interesting to just go and you need to spend time on the ground. It's a very, very, very cool space, and it's very both a space that makes me enthusiastic here in South Korea, and very frustrated because there's a ton of really cool people building things. There's a bit more of an app layer, for example, for as opposed to, let's say a bit like in Japan, it's a bit more of an app layer for crypto, which means that we should actually be able to just bring a lot more new users into the crypto space. But there's also all sorts of friction between, so let's say, two things. There's a bit of political cautiousness about the space, and I don't blame them considering Luna and so on. And on the other side, there's really good solid ground from Web 2 companies that have gone into Web 3, but it's sometimes they just see it too much as a corporate corporate way of like going into a new space. But it's a really, really cool country / cool city to be in, and very, very good at embracing new trends. You can see it close to the Lotte Tower. You've got these streets basically full of self studios and then and tarot shops and so on, where you can see how quickly South Koreans can embrace trends. But essentially, yeah, it's both very, very cool, very, very interesting, but also very challenging in some ways, because it's not that easy to do business here. So for us, it's about scaling and being consistent, essentially. So if you put a trading or your trading strategy essentially into an algorithm, you much more. Well, you have to be consistent about what happens. It's a good defense on our side when people sort of wonder what we do, and we say we're market neutral. So it means that we don't make money if things go up or down. We are market neutral as such, and it's coded as such. Another thing is very much the essence of what we do is we help. We're part of different market participants, and we help define what the price of the token should be. And that means we have to go across many different venues, and we have to trade, across many coins to do that. So we trade, 4 to 6 million times a day, and you can only do that with machines essentially. And the role we have is very much to help, people like you and others to buy and sell, Bitcoin or any coin with the least friction possible. So with the least movement, the price movement as possible. We look at the space as deeply as we can from, especially with Igor from research or journalists on the venture side. So on the venture side, we'll take much longer term bets. And I would say you fall into the same sort of filters than you would use for early stage, investing in general. There's just quality of the team matters really quite a lot. There's different people who look at more the macro side of things. So people who look at, essentially if you think of like, regardless if you think that we are actually in the winter now or spring, for next summer, we need fresh money to come in. Yeah. If you think of where the next money will come in, it's probably from large institutions as such, or Chinese retail coming back into the space. We don't know. But essentially, if you think of the flow, where things are going to flow, if you think an institution will come into the space and buy a lot of coins, it's probably going to be something that they really know, something that they can push through an investment committee, and that's probably going to be more like Bitcoin or some of the top 10. If you think of like retail coming into the space in size, that's probably going to be more meme coin. So I'm not giving you names, but just I think it's how I like to think it is. It could be completely independent from Wintermute, by the way, but it's more how I like to think of things with money flowing in and flowing out, and then who's going to buy, and then you obviously, if you want to make a profit, you need to be at least buying with that person or that entity or so on. And maybe sometimes you try to buy a few years ahead of those persons. So I don't know if it's necessarily technological trends and such, but we see, I'd say, if you think of the big problems we still have to solve in the crypto industry, there's a big issue in terms of DeFi versus CeFi. So there's a big issue in terms of essentially DeFi users are still just about 1.5% of all the total crypto users, and there's issues there. There's issues around trust. There's issues around even people would claim that you don't need trust and it should be trustless, but essentially when you want to have net leverage, you do still need some element of trust, and maybe some things around sort of solving a trust score or something a question around trust. Another element is like, how do we bridge more essentially real world assets, or how do we flip a bit more traditional finance into the crypto space? And that's there's real world asset discussion nowadays, and it's an interesting discussion because essentially DeFi initially just took off on the basis that there was zero yield elsewhere, and then there was some yield in DeFi Summer in 2020 and a bit afterwards, and now then there's real yield. You can get 4-5% on your treasuries. Then it's harder for DeFi to compete, but there's plenty of sources of assets basically that are in the real world that can be transposed onto the blockchain. And also I hope that with this there will be discovery of new assets or new business models as such that can be essentially leveraged through crypto.